Imagine working full-time, earning a decent salary, and still not being able to afford even a tiny apartment in your hometown. Imagine watching your childhood neighborhood transform into empty tourist flats, while locals are pushed out onto the streets. This isn't just a story of a few big cities. This is happening right now across Portugal. Just a decade ago, Portugal was one of Europe's hidden treasures, a peaceful, affordable paradise full of opportunity and charm. Life moved slowly, communities thrived, and locals could dream of a stable future. But today, that dream is slipping away. In Lisbon alone, housing prices have soared by an astonishing 250% over the past 10 years. Renting a modest one-bedroom apartment now easily costs 2,000 euros, while the minimum wage struggles to reach 900 euros. This isn't just a housing crisis, it's a warning sign of a much deeper economic unraveling. Wages are stagnant, the cost of living is exploding, and young people are being forced to leave their hometowns in search of better opportunities abroad. The Portugal that once promised hope and simplicity is now at risk of being lost forever. If this trend continues, the very soul of the nation could be changed for generations to come. How we got here. To truly understand how Portugal reached this critical point, we need to take a step back into its recent history. In 1974, Portugal emerged from decades of dictatorship after the peaceful Carnation Revolution. While countries like Germany and France had spent decades building strong industrial economies, Portugal was far behind. It was essentially starting from scratch. Its infrastructure was outdated, its industries were underdeveloped, and its workforce lacked the opportunities found elsewhere in Europe. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, European Union membership opened the door to massive investment. Billions of euros flowed into the country, financing new highways, bridges, airports, and modernization projects. For a time, it felt like Portugal was finally catching up. A new era of progress and optimism took hold. But beneath the surface, a deeper problem remained unsolved. Portugal struggled to create industries that could produce high-paying, sustainable jobs. Unlike Germany's manufacturing strength or France's financial and tech industries, Portugal's economic base remained fragile. Instead of diversifying into technology, manufacturing, or innovation sectors, Portugal increasingly leaned into its services economy, particularly tourism. Beautiful beaches, historic cities, and warm hospitality made Portugal a major tourist hotspot. Tourism became a lifeline for economic growth. However, this heavy dependence came at a cost. It made the economy vulnerable to external shocks and failed to provide widespread opportunities for locals. Today's crisis is deeply rooted in this history, a reliance on short-term gains rather than building long-term economic resilience. The rise and risk of tourism. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, tourism in Portugal experienced an unprecedented boom. The country positioned itself on the global stage as one of Europe's most affordable and attractive destinations. Sun-drenched beaches, charming historic towns, and vibrant cities like Lisbon, Porto, and the Algarve drew millions of visitors each year. Investment poured into new hotels, luxury resorts, boutique guest houses, and vacation rentals, transforming once quiet neighborhoods into bustling tourist hubs. Tourism quickly became one of the largest and most vital sectors of the Portuguese economy, generating billions of euros annually. For a while, it seemed like a perfect success story. Tourism created jobs, boosted small businesses, and fueled overall economic growth. However, this heavy dependence came at a significant cost. Many of the jobs created were low-wage, seasonal positions with little opportunity for long-term career growth. The focus on serving tourists replaced the need to develop strong, high-skilled industries that could offer stable employment and drive innovation. At the same time, the influx of visitors put massive pressure on housing markets. Properties that once housed local families were converted into short-term rentals like Airbnb, pushing up rental prices and making it harder for ordinary Portuguese citizens to afford homes in their own cities. What initially seemed like a golden opportunity has now revealed serious risks. The Portuguese economy, overly reliant on tourism, became vulnerable to market fluctuations, and the very communities that made the country so attractive are now struggling to survive. The golden visa gamble. In 2012, as Portugal struggled to recover from the devastating effects of the global financial crisis, the government introduced the Golden Visa program. The idea was simple: offer fast-track residency to wealthy foreigners willing to invest in the country with a special focus on real estate purchases. It was marketed as a win-win solution. Fresh capital would help rebuild the economy, create jobs, and revitalize struggling urban areas. At first, it seemed like a smart move. Foreign money poured into Portugal's property market. Investors from China, Russia, Brazil, and other countries snapped up apartments, townhouses, and historic buildings. However, many of these properties were not lived in. They were bought as safe investments, left empty, or turned into high-priced short-term rentals. The effects were dramatic and immediate. In cities like Lisbon and Porto, property prices skyrocketed by more than 250% within a single decade. What had once been affordable working-class neighborhoods were transformed almost overnight. Local families found themselves priced out of the communities they had lived in for generations. Entire sections of historic city centers were effectively sold off to the highest bidder, often prioritizing the needs of foreign investors over local residents. While the Golden Visa program brought in billions of euros, it also fueled housing inequality and deepened social divides. Today, many see it not as an economic savior, but as one of the key contributors to Portugal's ongoing affordability crisis. A nation sold piece by piece. It wasn't just homes that were swept up by foreign investment, it was the very foundations of Portugal's economy. During the years following the financial crisis, some of the country's most important national assets were sold off to foreign interests. Portugal's oldest and most trusted insurance company, Fidelidade, was sold to Chinese investors. The energy sector followed a similar path. Once a proudly Portuguese-owned industry, the national energy company is now largely controlled by foreign corporations. It didn't stop there. Construction firms, transportation networks, and critical infrastructure projects slowly came under the influence of outside investors. Each transaction was often celebrated as a sign of Portugal's growing global integration. But in reality, something more troubling was happening. With every sale, more and more wealth flowed out of Portugal's economy, enriching foreign shareholders rather than strengthening local communities. What was once national pride is now corporate property, and today many Portuguese citizens are asking a difficult question: how much of their country do they truly still own? The housing and income disaster. Today, Portugal faces one of the worst affordability crises in all of Europe. Half of the country's workforce earns less than 1,000 euros per month. Yet, in cities like Lisbon, renting even a modest one-bedroom apartment can easily cost 2,000 euros or more. For many, the math simply doesn't add up. The consequences are devastating, especially for young people. More than half of all adults aged 25 to 34 are still living with their parents, not because they want to, but because they have no realistic path to financial independence. Homeownership, once a cornerstone of Portuguese life, has become a distant dream for an entire generation. At the same time, the country's birth rate has plummeted to just 1.3 children per woman, one of the lowest in the world. As families shrink and young people delay starting their own households, entire rural villages are being emptied out, turning into abandoned ghost towns. Portugal's population has been slowly shrinking since 2010, a trend that receives little attention but poses a serious, long-term threat to the country's future prosperity and cultural identity. What was once a land of promise is now grappling with a silent crisis that could reshape it for generations to come. Government actions, or lack of them. Despite the growing alarm from citizens, economists, and even international observers, the Portuguese government has largely doubled down on policies that favor foreign investment over local stability. In 2022, rather than addressing the deepening housing and income crisis, the government introduced a new visa program aimed at digital nomads. This program, much like the Golden Visa before it, encouraged wealthy foreigners to settle in Portugal by offering attractive tax breaks and the promise of a lower cost of living compared to their home countries. While this move succeeded in bringing more money into the economy, it also placed even more pressure on an already overheated housing market. Meanwhile, the construction of new housing remains heavily restricted by layers of complex bureaucracy. Environmental protections, heritage preservation laws, and noise regulations, while important in their own right, have made it exceedingly difficult to expand the housing supply. The result is a vicious cycle. Demand keeps rising, driven by foreign buyers and digital workers, but the supply of affordable homes remains frozen. Prices continue to soar, and ordinary Portuguese citizens find themselves increasingly pushed out of the cities and communities they once called home. Rather than solving the crisis, government inaction is allowing it to spiral even further out of control. A country at risk. Portugal today stands at a critical tipping point. If the current trajectory continues unchecked, The country risks becoming little more than a hollow shell of what it once was, a beautiful tourist destination polished for outsiders, while the very people who built its cities, culture, and traditions are pushed out by rising costs and limited opportunities. The mass protests that erupted in Lisbon in 2024 are not isolated events. They are part of a growing movement fueled by frustration, anger, and desperation. Thousands took to the streets not out of political ideology, but out of a basic demand for dignity and survival. These demonstrations are desperate calls for help, for affordable homes, for stable jobs, and for a future that does not force young people to abandon their homeland in search of better prospects abroad. Without real change, Portugal faces the grim reality of a shrinking native population, a hollowed-out middle class, and a society increasingly divided between wealthy newcomers and struggling locals. The heart of Portugal, its working families, its students, its elderly, and its dreamers, is at risk of being lost. The path forward demands bold leadership, honest conversations, and a rethinking of policies that have prioritized short-term economic gains over long-term national well-being. The clock is ticking, and the world is watching to see whether Portugal will reclaim its future, or continue down a path that could change its identity forever. The Portuguese people are fighting not just for their homes, but for the very soul of their nation. This is not simply an economic battle. It's a struggle to preserve a way of life that has been built over generations. The decisions made today will echo for decades to come, shaping the lives of future Portuguese families. The world knows Portugal for its breathtaking beauty, rich history, and incredible resilience in the face of hardship. But now, a new question looms larger than ever. Can Portugal find the strength to save itself before it's too late?